The stars disappeared one by one. Commander Hyunwoo Park pressed his face against the cold glass of the lunar observation station and watched in horror as alien ships blocked out the night sky above Earth. Each vessel was larger than a city, black metal gleaming with strange purple lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. "How many?" Hyunwoo asked his communications officer without turning around. 9,900 ships, sir," came the shaky reply. "Maybe more. Our sensors can't count them all." Hyunwoo closed his eyes for a moment. The Earth Defense Force had exactly 47 operational warships. The math was simple and terrifying. He opened his comm channel to all stations. "This is Lunar Base to all Earth Defense units. We are looking at the largest invasion fleet in human history. All units prepare for immediate combat operations." 300,000 kilometers below, Captain Sojin Kim was helping load the last group of children onto evacuation transports in Busan. The morning had started normal. People went to work, kids went to school, and the harbor was busy with fishing boats coming back with their catch. Now the sky was dark with alien ships and panic filled the streets. "Mama, I'm scared," whispered a little girl clutching a stuffed rabbit. Sojin knelt down and smiled at her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Minju." "Well, Minju, my name is Sojin, and I promise we're going to keep you safe. These big ships are going to take you somewhere the bad guys can't find you, okay?" The little girl nodded and climbed into the transport. Sojin watched it lift off toward the mountain shelters, then turned to her radio. "Tae-ho, how are the shield generators looking?" Her husband's voice crackled back through the static. "Not good, Sojin. These things are throwing some kind of energy at us that our shields weren't designed to handle. I don't think we can hold them for long." Lieutenant Tae-ho Kim stood in the Defense Control Center, watching screens that showed numbers dropping fast. The city's protective energy shields were failing piece by piece. Around him, technicians worked frantically to reroute power and strengthen the barriers, but everyone knew it was hopeless. "Sir," called out Sergeant Bo Ram Lee from her station, "the aliens are targeting population centers first. New York just went dark. London is burning." Tae-ho felt his stomach drop. If the biggest cities were already falling, what chance did Busan have? He thought about his wife Sojin out there evacuating civilians, and their daughter Minju somewhere in the mountain bunkers. He had to buy them more time. "All units focus everything on the southern shield grid. We need to keep the evacuation routes open for as long as possible." Above the Earth, Admiral Kexthar of the Velthrak hegemony watched the human planet burn with satisfaction. His species had conquered 437 worlds over the past 1,000 years. Each time, the process was the same. Overwhelming force, quick surrender, then processing of the surviving population for slavery or experiments. Humans were proving no different. Their primitive weapons bounced harmlessly off Velthrak shields. Their ships exploded after single hits, from plasma cannons. Their communications were easy to jam, and their military formations fell apart under concentrated fire. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "human resistance in the major population centers has collapsed. Estimated time to complete planetary control, 6 hours. "Excellent. Begin landing operations in conquered zones. Set up the processing centers according to standard protocol." But something was bothering Kexthar. Most species tried to surrender after the first demonstration of Velthrak power. The humans were still fighting even when it was clearly hopeless. Their ships kept attacking even when they were heavily damaged. Their ground forces continued resistance even after their command structures were destroyed. It was illogical. It was wasteful. It was primitive. In space above Earth's moon, Commander Hyunwoo watched his fleet die. The Earth Defense Force ships fought bravely, but they might as well have been throwing rocks at mountains. Alien energy beams sliced through human armor like it was paper. Human missiles exploded harmlessly against alien shields. "Sir, we've lost contact with 31 ships," reported his tactical officer, her voice barely steady. "The remaining 16 are falling back to defensive positions around the lunar facilities." Hyunwoo knew those 16 ships wouldn't last another hour. The aliens had thousands of vessels and seemed to have unlimited ammunition. But something was nagging at him. The alien attack patterns were too perfect, too predictable. Every move followed logical military doctrine. "Communications, patch me through to General Lee at Pentagon Command." "Sir, Pentagon Command was destroyed 20 minutes ago. Then find me whoever's in charge down there." After several minutes of searching, they found General Dong-Hyun Lee broadcasting from a bunker deep beneath the ruins of Washington, D.C. His image appeared on the screen, covered in dust and blood, but still alert. "Commander Park, what's your status?" "We're beaten, General. Complete military defeat within 6 hours. But I think I'm seeing something strange in their attack patterns." "What do you mean?" "They fight like machines, sir. Perfect formations, logical target selection, efficient resource allocation. But they're not adapting to anything unexpected. When Captain Rodriguez's ship pretended to surrender and then rammed their cruiser, it took them 4 minutes to adjust their screening patterns." General Lee leaned forward. "You think they're not used to enemies who don't fight by the rules?" "That's exactly what I think, sir." On the surface, the battle for Busan was ending. The city's shields had finally collapsed under the alien bombardment. Tae-ho Kim stood in the ruins of the defense center, watching alien landing craft descend like deadly insects toward the harbor. "All remaining units, this is Lieutenant Kim. Fall back to secondary positions. Repeat, fall back and prepare for guerrilla operations." He grabbed his rifle and emergency pack. The conventional war was over, but something told him the real war was just beginning. As he ran through the rubble-filled streets, he saw something that gave him hope. Groups of civilians weren't running away in panic anymore. They were moving with purpose, carrying supplies toward hidden shelters, helping wounded soldiers, and watching the alien landing craft with calculating eyes instead of fear. Captain So-Jin Kim received her husband's message as she helped the last evacuation transport reach the mountain bunkers. Around her, dozens of other Defense Force personnel were organizing civilians, distributing weapons, and setting up communication networks using equipment the aliens probably couldn't even detect. "Listen to me," she told the group of refugees, and soldiers gathered around her. "The pretty war is over. Now we fight the ugly war, and humans have always been very good at ugly wars." In his underground bunker, General Dong-hyun Lee looked at the tactical displays showing alien forces occupying every major city on Earth. The conventional military was destroyed. The government was scattered. Most of the population was either dead, captured, or hiding. By every measure that mattered to military science, Earth had lost. But as reports came in from around the world, Lee began to smile. Humans weren't surrendering. They were disappearing into sewers, subways, forests, and mountains. They were taking their weapons, their knowledge, and their anger with them. The aliens had won the first battle, but they had never fought humans before, and they didn't understand what they had just started. The invasion fleet that had conquered Earth in 6 hours was about to learn why humans were the only species that had never been successfully occupied for long by anyone, including other humans. The real war was about to begin. 3 months had passed since the sky turned dark with alien ships. The Veltrak had built their victory monuments in every major city, towering metal structures that broadcast their triumph across the galaxy. They had turned sports stadiums into processing centers where humans lined up in silent rows, waiting to be sorted into work groups, experiment subjects, or disposal units. Admiral Kexthar walked through the main processing facility in what used to be Seoul, observing the efficient operation with satisfaction. Thousands of humans moved through the sorting lines each day. The weak ones went to the disposal units. The strong ones became laborers in the mining colonies. The intelligent ones went to the research laboratories. "Admiral," his aide reported, "planetary pacification is 97% complete. Only minor resistance pockets remain in remote areas. They pose no significant threat." Kexthar nodded. This conquest had proceeded exactly like all the others. Initial shock, brief resistance, then acceptance of the new reality. Humans were proving to be typically primitive in their response patterns, but 50 meters below his feet, in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath Seoul, Jin-Ho Choi was proving the Admiral wrong. Jin-Ho had been a software engineer before the invasion. He wrote programs for smartphone games and lived in a small apartment with his cat. Now he lived in darkness, sleeping on cardboard, eating canned food, and planning the downfall of an interstellar empire. "The pattern repeats every 47 minutes, he whispered to the small group gathered around his salvaged laptop. "Their patrol routes, communication checks, shift changes, everything runs on a precise schedule." Yoonji Song, who used to teach physics at Seoul National University, leaned closer to look at his screen. Her clothes were dirty and torn, but her eyes were sharp as ever. "That's not surprising. Most advanced civilizations develop rigid systems for efficiency, but rigid systems have weak points." "What kind of weak points?" asked Wu Jin Kang. The former construction worker had become their explosives expert, learning to make bombs from cleaning supplies and fertilizer. Predictability, Yunji smiled grimly. If you know exactly when and where something will happen, you can plan accordingly. Above them, the regular patrol of Veltrak's soldiers walked through Myeongdong Shopping District, their boots clicking in perfect rhythm on the empty streets. Their route never varied. They checked the same intersections, scanned the same buildings, and reported status at the same intervals. Jinho had been watching them for weeks, timing everything down to the second. Tonight, he was going to give them something new to think about. At exactly 11:47 p.m., when the patrol was furthest from the old electronics market, Wu Jin's homemade bomb exploded inside a Veltrak communication relay. The blast wasn't big enough to kill anyone, but it was perfectly timed to disrupt the aliens' network just as they were conducting their nightly status update. For 17 minutes, the sole occupation zone went silent. No reports, no confirmations, no data flowing through their quantum communication grid. In those 17 minutes, resistance cells across the city struck at 12 different targets, then melted back into the underground before the aliens could respond. The Veltrak were confused. Their perfect system had glitched. But glitches didn't happen in Veltrak technology. Their computers were tested, their networks were secure, their equipment was flawless. They never considered that the glitch might be intentional. 200 kilometers north, in what used to be the DMZ between North and South Korea, Commander Hyun-woo Park crouched in an abandoned bunker with the scattered remains of Earth's military leadership. General Dong-hyun Lee spread a hand-drawn map on the concrete floor, marking positions with colored stones. "We have confirmed resistance groups in 43 cities," the general reported quietly. "They're using pre-digital communication methods, ham radio, messenger birds, even smoke signals. The aliens can't intercept what they don't understand." "What about weapons?" asked Colonel Hya-jin. "Oh, formerly South Korea's military attaché to the United Nations. She had been in New York when the invasion began and barely escaped the city's destruction." "That's the interesting part," Hyun-woo replied. "They're not using traditional weapons. They're sabotaging infrastructure, disrupting communications, and causing chaos in the aliens' administrative systems. It's like they're fighting a completely different kind of war." "Because they are," General Lee said. "The aliens conquered our military, but they never conquered our people. And our people are learning to fight back in ways the aliens never expected." In Busan, Captain So Jin Kim was teaching those lessons to a new generation of fighters. The old shipyard had been converted into a training camp hidden beneath piles of scrap metal. 50 former civilians gathered around her as she demonstrated how to disable a Veltrak patrol drone with nothing but wire and battery acid. "Remember," she told them, "we can't match their technology, but we can confuse it. Their systems are designed to handle logical threats. We need to be illogical." Young Ho Nam, who used to drive delivery trucks through the city's narrow streets, raised his hand. "What if we captured one of their vehicles? Could we learn to fly it?" So-jin considered this. The aliens' personal aircraft were small, fast, and heavily automated. But automation meant programming, and programming meant patterns that could be studied and exploited. "That's actually not a bad idea," she said. "If we could get our hands on their technology and figure out how it works." "I might be able to help with that," came a voice from the back of the group. Everyone turned to see Yoonji Song climbing down from a maintenance ladder. She had walked 3 days through destroyed countryside to reach Busan. "Professor Song?" So-jin recognized her from television interviews before the invasion. "What are you doing here?" "Learning," Yoonji replied simply. "I've been studying salvaged alien equipment for 2 months. Their technology is impressive, but it has limitations. Specifically, it's too perfect." She pulled a small device from her backpack, something that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a piece of alien machinery. "This is a Veltrak communication unit I repaired using human components. It can access their local networks, but more importantly, it can send false signals." "What kind of false signals?" Woo Jin asked. He had followed Yoonji from Seoul, carrying a backpack full of improvised explosives. "Any kind we want?" Yoonji grinned. "Status reports, maintenance schedules, patrol assignments. We can make their own systems lie to them." The implications were staggering. If they could feed false information into the alien command network, they could manipulate enemy movements, create confusion, and coordinate attacks with precision. But the real breakthrough came when Jin-Ho arrived with his laptop and a collection of data storage devices salvaged from destroyed human facilities. "I've been analyzing their network protocols," he explained. "The Veltrak use quantum encryption that's impossible for us to break. But they made one mistake. They assumed we couldn't understand their data formats." He connected his laptop to Yunji's modified communicator and began typing rapidly. "Human programming languages evolved from chaos. We learned to make computers work despite hardware failures, software bugs, and user errors. Our code is messy, adaptive, and full of unexpected solutions." "And their code?" Sojin asked. "Perfect. Logical, predictable, and completely unprepared for something like this." Jin-Ho's fingers flew across the keyboard as he uploaded a simple program into the alien network. It was barely 50 lines of code, written in a human programming language that the aliens had never encountered. "What does it do?" Young-Ho asked. "It makes their communication relays play human music instead of transmitting military orders," Jin-Ho replied with a smile. Within minutes, Veltrak command posts across South Korea began broadcasting everything from classical Mozart to K-pop songs. The aliens' perfect network had been infected with chaos, and they had no idea how to stop. Admiral Kexthar stood in his command center, listening to human music pour from every speaker in the facility. His technicians worked frantically to isolate the problem, but every time they thought they had found the source, the music started somewhere else. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. Our systems show no signs of intrusion. All security protocols remain intact. The music appears to be generating spontaneously from within our own network." For the first time since the invasion began, Kexthar felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. His perfect system was failing in ways that made no logical sense. 50 meters below, Jin-Ho Choi smiled as he listened to his favorite song echoing through the alien facility above. The Veltrak had won the war, but they were about to lose something. Much more important, they were about to lose control. 6 months after the first alien ship darkened Earth's sky, something impossible happened. The Veltrak began to lose. It started small, a patrol that never returned, a communication relay that broadcast children's lullabies instead of military orders, a supply convoy that drove in circles for hours because their navigation systems thought they were somewhere else entirely. Admiral Kexthar stared at the tactical display in his command ship, watching red warning lights blink across every continent. His perfect conquest was falling apart piece by piece, and he couldn't understand why. "Report," he ordered his tactical officer. "Sir, we've lost contact with 67 ground installations in the past week. Our patrols are reporting equipment failures, navigation errors, and communication breakdowns. But our technical teams can find no mechanical problems." "Then what is causing these failures?" The tactical officer hesitated. "The humans appeared to be using some form of warfare we've never encountered before. They're not attacking our forces directly. Instead, they're somehow corrupting our systems from within." Kexthar had conquered worlds for 3 centuries. He had faced every form of military resistance known to galactic civilization. But this was different. This was chaos masquerading as strategy, and it was working. Deep beneath Seoul, Jin-Ho Choi was proving that chaos could indeed be a strategy. His small team had grown into a network of cyber warriors operating from hidden bases across the planet. They called themselves the Digital Ghosts, and they were haunting the Veltrak's perfect systems. "New virus is ready for deployment," Jin-Ho announced to his team. "This one is special. It doesn't just corrupt their communications. It makes their own weapons target each other." Yunji Song looked up from the alien equipment she was modifying. "How does it work?" "Simple. Veltrak targeting systems identify threats based on energy signatures and movement patterns. I've written a program that makes their computers think other Veltrak units are human resistance fighters." "That's brilliant," said Wu Jin Kang, who was carefully packing explosives into what looked like ordinary cleaning supplies. "When do we deploy it?" "Tonight. But we need a way to inject it into their main tactical network. That means getting close to their command facilities." The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Sojin Kim had been building what she called the Shadow Fleet, a collection of captured alien shuttlecraft that her technical teams had learned to fly and modify. It had taken months of careful study, but humans had finally figured out how to operate Veltrak technology. The key was understanding that their systems were designed for perfect users who never made mistakes. Human pilots, who were used to working with imperfect equipment, could push the alien craft beyond their programmed limitations. "We have 18 operational shuttles," Sojin reported to the Joint Resistance Leadership meeting. "Each one can carry a small strike team, and they're invisible to Veltrak sensors because the computers think they're friendly units." Young-Ho Nam had become her best pilot, learning to fly alien craft through pure instinct and reckless courage. "The machines want to fly in straight lines and perfect formations," he explained. "But if you fight the automation and fly like a crazy person, you become unpredictable. Their defensive systems can't target what they can't predict." Commander Hyunwoo Park studied the tactical maps spread across the bunker floor. After months of guerrilla warfare, the human resistance had learned to think like their enemy while fighting like themselves. "Here's the plan," he said. "We hit them everywhere at once. Jinho's virus gets uploaded to their tactical networks while Wu Jin's explosives take out their power generation. So Jin's shadow fleet provides air support and escape routes." "What about their response?" asked Colonel Hyojin. "Oh, once they realize what's happening, they'll coordinate a counterattack." "That's where the final piece comes in, General Dong-hyun," Lee smiled grimly. "Professor Song, show them what you've discovered." Yoonji stood and held up a small vial filled with pale yellow liquid. "This is synthetic Veltrak pheromone. It took me 4 months to analyze their biochemical communication system, but I finally cracked it." "They communicate with smell?" Young-Ho asked, confused. "Not exactly. They use pheromones to convey emotional states and urgency levels. This particular combination translates to something like extreme danger, retreat immediately, abandon position. When they detect it, their instincts override their logical thinking." The plan was audacious beyond belief. Coordinate cyber attacks, explosive sabotage, airstrikes, and biochemical warfare simultaneously across the entire planet. The margin for error was 0, and the consequences of failure would be the complete extermination of human resistance. But they had one advantage the Veltrak could never understand. Humans had been fighting impossible wars against overwhelming odds for their entire history, and they had learned that the best time to attack is when victory seems most hopeless. The assault began at exactly midnight, coordinated by ham radio, operators using Morse code that the aliens couldn't intercept. In Seoul, Jinho and his team infiltrated the main communication hub by disguising themselves as maintenance workers. Veltrak's security systems were programmed to monitor for weapons and explosives, not for humans carrying laptop computers. "Upload. Beginning now," Jinho whispered into his radio as he connected his computer to the alien network. His virus spread through their tactical systems like digital wildfire, rewriting targeting protocols and communication pathways. 3 kilometers away, Wu Jin triggered his explosives at the main power distribution center, but these weren't ordinary bombs. He had learned to create devices that produced specific electromagnetic frequencies that disrupted Veltrak equipment without destroying human electronics. In the sky above the city, Young-Ho led a squadron of captured shuttles in the most chaotic attack pattern ever attempted. Instead of military formations, they flew in spirals, loops, and random directions that made no tactical sense, but completely confused the alien defensive computers. "Remember," Sojin's voice crackled through their communications, "fly like you're drunk, think like you're crazy, and shoot at anything that shoots back." The alien air defenses, designed to counter logical attack patterns, couldn't track targets that moved like falling leaves in a hurricane. Young-Ho's wild flying style was being copied by pilots across the planet, turning aerial combat into a form of deadly chaos. But the masterstroke came when Yoonji released her synthetic pheromones into the ventilation systems of every major Veltrak installation simultaneously. Within minutes, alien commanders across Earth were receiving urgent biochemical signals that triggered their species' most basic survival instincts. Admiral Kexathar was in the middle of coordinating his defense when the smell hit him. Every cell in his body screamed that he was in mortal danger and needed to flee immediately. His rational mind knew this made no sense, but millions of years of evolution were stronger than logic. "Admiral," his communications officer reported in a panic, "we're receiving retreat orders from installations across the planet, but we never sent those orders." "Ignore them," Kexthar tried to say, but his own voice was shaking. The pheromone was affecting him too, making it hard to think clearly. Sir, our targeting systems are malfunctioning. They're identifying our own units as hostile, and our power grids are failing across multiple sectors. On the tactical display, Kexthar watched his perfect conquest dissolve into complete chaos. Units were abandoning their positions, weapons were firing on friendly forces, and communications were filled with human music and children's voices. In 72 hours, the most powerful military force in galactic history went from total control to complete confusion. Velthrak forces retreated to isolated strongholds, cut off from their command structure and fighting shadows that struck without warning and vanished without trace. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, Admiral Kexthar faced an enemy that fought not with superior technology or greater numbers, but with pure creative chaos. And chaos, he was learning, was impossible to defeat with logic. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned their greatest weakness, their unpredictability, into their greatest weapon. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had become predators. The real war was just beginning. 1 year after the invasion began, the tables had turned completely. Admiral Kexthar crouched in the ruins of what used to be his command center in Tokyo, listening to the sound of human aircraft circling overhead. His mighty fleet of 9,900 ships had been reduced to scattered groups hiding in remote locations, hunted by an enemy that seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear like smoke. The Velthrak soldiers around him looked nothing like the confident conquerors who had landed on Earth 12 months ago. Their perfect uniforms were torn and dirty. Their advanced weapons were jury-rigged with salvaged parts. Their eyes showed something that had never existed in Velthrak military history: fear. "Admiral," his remaining tactical officer whispered, "human strike teams have been detected approaching from 3 directions. We have maybe 10 minutes before they find us." Kexthar closed his eyes. How had it come to this? How had a primitive species with inferior technology turned his glorious conquest into a nightmare of constant retreat and defeat? The answer was, flying overhead in a modified Velthrak shuttle piloted by Captain Sung-Min Bae. A year ago, he had been a cook in the South Korean Army. Now he led Wolfpack Alpha, the most feared human strike team in the Resistance. "Target confirmed," Sung-Min radioed to his team. "Velthrak command post in the old shopping district. Heat signatures show approximately 30 hostiles." In the passenger compartment, his team prepared their equipment with the calm efficiency of veterans. Ji-Won Lee, who used to be a nurse, before learning combat medicine, checked her supplies of captured alien healing devices. Kwang-Ho Park, a former auto mechanic, made final adjustments to their modified weapons that could punch through Velthrak armor. "Remember the drill," Sung-Min said as they approached the landing zone. "Fast, loud, and confusing. Don't give them time to organize a defense." The shuttle touched down in a shower of sparks, its landing deliberately rough and unpredictable. Before the engines had fully shut down, the team was already moving, spreading out in a pattern that looked random but had been carefully designed to create maximum chaos. Velthrak defensive training assumed enemies would advance logically, seeking cover and coordinating their movements. Wolfpack Alpha did the opposite. They ran straight into open ground, firing from unexpected angles and communicating through hand signals that made no sense to alien monitoring systems. "Contact left!" Ji-Won called out, but instead of taking cover, she ran toward the enemy position while firing her weapon in a zigzag pattern that confused the aliens' targeting computers. Kwang-Ho flanked right, but instead of moving in a straight line, he bounced off walls, rolled under obstacles, and changed direction every few seconds. His modified rifle fired rounds that exploded into smaller fragments, creating the chaos of multiple shooters from a single weapon. The Velthrak soldiers tried to respond with their standard defensive procedures, but every tactic in their training manual assumed they were fighting a rational enemy. Wolfpack Alpha was anything but rational. Within minutes, the alien command post was overrun. Admiral Kexthar found himself staring down the barrel of a human weapon held by a former cook who had somehow become one of the deadliest soldiers in the galaxy. "You're coming with us," Sung-Min said in broken Velthrak. He had learned the alien language from captured prisoners, but he spoke it with intentional mistakes that made his meaning unclear and unsettling. 300 kilometers away, Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood in the command center of what used to be called the War Memorial of Korea. The building had been converted into the headquarters of Earth's new military, and the walls were covered with tactical displays showing human forces advancing across the planet. "Status report," he requested from Colonel Haya Jin-O, who had become his chief intelligence officer. "Veltrak forces are down to an estimated 3,000 combat-effective troops scattered across 47 locations," she reported. "They're no longer capable of coordinated operations. Most are simply trying to survive until rescue arrives. And what are the chances of rescue? According to our intercepted communications, the Veltrak High Command believes this planet has been infected with some kind of madness virus. They've declared Earth a quarantine zone and forbidden any rescue missions." Hyun Woo almost smiled at the irony. The Veltrak were so unable to understand human tactics that they had convinced themselves Earth was literally cursed. "What about Operation Boomerang?" he asked. He Jin's expression grew serious. 50 captured alien vessels are available, but only 18 have crews trained well enough for deep space operations. Success probability is estimated at 30%. And if we don't try, the scattered Veltrak forces will eventually regroup and establish contact with their fleet. We'll be back where we started, except with less element of surprise. The plan was desperate beyond belief. Use captured alien technology to hunt down the retreating Veltrak forces before they could escape Earth's solar system. It meant sending human crews into space, using ships they barely understood to fight enemies with centuries more experience. But it was their only chance to ensure the aliens could never return. Lieutenant Tae-ho Kim volunteered to command the most dangerous mission, a direct assault on the Veltrak command ship hiding in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. His wife So-jin had argued against it, but they both knew someone had to take the risk. "You have a daughter to think about," she had said. "That's exactly why I have to do this," he replied. "If we don't stop them now, Minju will spend her whole life waiting for them to come back." His crew was a mixture of professional soldiers and unlikely heroes. Min Soo-yoon had been a taxi driver in Seoul who knew the city's streets better than anyone. His ability to navigate complex routes had translated surprisingly well to piloting spacecraft through asteroid fields. Hairi Cha had taught elementary school before the invasion. Her talent for keeping children organized and focused made her an excellent tactical coordinator who could manage the chaos of space combat. "Remember," Tae-ho addressed his crew as they prepared for launch, "we're not trying to fight fair. We're trying to win. Use every dirty trick you can think of, and when you run out of tricks, make up new ones." The modified alien ship lifted off from the hidden base in Antarctica, its human crew wearing salvaged Veltrak spacesuits and breathing recycled air. They had trained for 3 months on captured equipment, but theory was very different from reality. "Navigation online," Min-soo reported, his taxi driver instincts adapting to 3-dimensional space navigation. "Course plotted for the asteroid belt. Travel time, 6 days. Weapons systems ready," Hairi added, having learned to operate alien combat systems by treating them like very complicated classroom equipment. "All systems show green." As they left Earth's atmosphere, Tae-ho looked back at the blue planet that had somehow survived the greatest invasion in galactic history. 17 other ships were launching from hidden bases around the world, each carrying crews who had learned to fight impossible wars against overwhelming odds. Behind them, Admiral Kexthar sat in a human prison cell, staring at walls covered with children's drawings. The pictures showed stick figures of humans defeating monsters that looked suspiciously like Veltrak soldiers. Even the youngest humans seemed to understand that the aliens were no longer the hunters. The prey had learned to bite back, and their teeth were sharper than anyone had imagined. In space, 18 human-crewed alien ships accelerated toward their final battle, carrying crews who had learned the most important lesson in military history. Sometimes the best way to win is to fight, like you have nothing left to lose, because they didn't. The final battle took place in the cold darkness between Mars and Jupiter, where 18 human-crewed alien ships faced the last remnants of Admiral Kexthar's once mighty fleet. The Veltrak had retreated to this remote corner of the solar system, hoping to regroup and call for reinforcements from their home worlds. Lieutenant Tae-ho Kim stared through the view screen at the massive Veltrak command ship ahead. It was 10 times larger than his captured vessel, bristling with weapons that could vaporize his entire crew in seconds. Around it, 40 smaller warships formed a protective screen, their sensors scanning space for any sign of approaching enemies. "They don't see us yet," reported Min Su-yoon from the navigation station. His taxi driver instincts had proven surprisingly useful for moving through asteroid fields without being detected. "Their sensors are looking for logical approach patterns." "Good," Tae-ho replied, "because we're about to do something completely illogical." In the other 17 ships scattered throughout the asteroid belt, human crews prepared for the most desperate attack in military history. They had no backup, no reinforcements, and no chance of survival if their plan failed. But they had something the Velthrak could never understand: the absolute refusal to give up. Captain Young-ho Nam commanded the fighter squadron, flying a modified scout ship that barely held together. His crew consisted of former civilians who had learned space combat through pure determination and countless hours of practice on salvaged simulators. "All units," Tae-ho's voice crackled through the communication system. "Remember what we practiced. Dance like you're at a wedding, fight like you're protecting your family, and fly like the laws of physics are just suggestions." The attack began with Young-ho's fighters emerging from behind asteroids in a formation that looked like traditional Korean fan dancing. Their movements were graceful, coordinated, and completely unpredictable to alien defensive computers designed to counter military attack patterns. "What are they doing?" the Velthrak tactical officer asked Admiral Zixthon, who had taken command after Kexthar's capture. "Their formation makes no tactical sense." "Ignore them," the admiral ordered. "Focus on the larger ships. Those fighters can't possibly threaten our capital vessels." He was wrong. Young-ho's pilots had learned to use their ship's maneuverability in ways the original designers never intended. They spun, rolled, and twisted through space like leaves in a windstorm, firing weapons in patterns that created overlapping fields of destruction. But the real surprise came when Tae-ho's ship, the Soul's Vengeance, suddenly accelerated directly toward the Velthrak flagship. Not in an attack pattern, not in an evasive maneuver, but in a straight line at maximum speed. "He's going to ram us!" the Velthrak tactical officer shouted. "Impossible!" Admiral Zixthon replied. "No rational commander would sacrifice his ship for such a small tactical advantage." That was the Velthrak's fundamental mistake. They kept assuming humans were rational. At the last possible moment, Soul's Vengeance didn't ram the flagship. Instead, it used its momentum to swing around the larger ship like a stone on a string, firing its weapons at point-blank range into the Velthrak vessel's engine compartments. The damage was devastating, but more importantly, it was unexpected. The flagship's defensive systems had been programmed to handle frontal assaults, flanking maneuvers, and coordinated attacks. They had no protocols for dealing with an enemy ship that used physics like a weapon. "All fighters, execute pattern Arirang," Tae-ho commanded, naming the maneuver after a traditional Korean folk song that every pilot had memorized. Young-ho's squadron began weaving through the Velthrak fleet in movements that matched the rhythm and flow of the ancient melody. Their ships danced between enemy vessels, firing at random intervals that corresponded to musical beats rather than tactical opportunities. The alien defensive computers tried to predict their next moves by analyzing their flight patterns, but how do you predict the path of a song? How do you counter music with mathematics? "They're everywhere," the Velthrak communications officer reported in panic. "Our targeting systems can't lock onto them. They're moving like what?" Admiral Zixthon demanded. "Like they're dancing, sir." Hairi Cha, coordinating the attack from Soul's Vengeance, watched her tactical display with the calm focus she had once used to manage a classroom full of energetic children. Space combat, she had discovered, was surprisingly similar to keeping 30 kids organized during a field trip. "Group 3, you're getting too spread out," she radioed to a cluster of human ships. "Tighten up and follow group leaders' movements. Group 7, excellent formation. Keep doing exactly what you're doing." Her teaching background had given her an unusual perspective on military tactics. Instead of thinking about killing enemies, she thought about protecting her students. Instead of overwhelming force, she used coordination and teamwork. The battle turned into something that had never happened before in galactic military history, a space combat engagement that looked more like performance art than warfare. Human. Ships moved in patterns based on cultural dances, musical rhythms, and artistic expressions that alien computers couldn't analyze or predict. But the decisive moment came when Tae-ho realized that destroying the Velthrak fleet wasn't enough. They needed to capture the flagship and its command staff to prevent them from calling for reinforcements. All units, prepare for boarding action, he announced. Boarding action? Min-Su asked. Sir, we're in space. How do we board an enemy ship? The same way humans have always boarded enemy ships, Taeho replied. We get close enough to jump across. What followed was the first recorded case of human infantry successfully storming an alien capital ship in zero gravity. Taeho and his crew used their ship's docking clamps to attach directly to the Velthrak flagship's hull, then cut through the armor with mining tools they had modified for combat. The Velthrak crew inside the ship had never faced boarding parties before. Their training assumed that space combat would be conducted at long range with energy weapons and guided missiles. They had no procedures for dealing with humans carrying improvised weapons in their own corridors. Surrender, Taeho told Admiral Zixthon in broken Velthrak, holding a weapon made from spare parts and determination. Your fleet is defeated. Your invasion is over. Go home and tell your people that Earth is not for conquest. The Admiral looked around at his bridge, where human soldiers were helping wounded Velthrak crew members and treating prisoners with surprising gentleness. These weren't the savage primitives his species had expected to conquer. These were warriors, who fought with honor even against enemies who had shown them none. How? He asked simply. How what? How did you defeat us? We had superior technology, greater numbers, more experience. How did a primitive species destroy the greatest fleet in galactic history? Taeho considered the question carefully. You fought like you were programmed to fight. We fought like we had nothing left to lose. You tried to conquer us with fear. We fought back with hope. The aftermath of the Battle of the Asteroid Belt was swift. With their command structure destroyed and their fleet scattered, the remaining Velthrak forces surrendered. But more importantly, they carried a message back to their home worlds. Earth was protected by something more dangerous than weapons or technology. It was protected by humans who refused to be conquered. 5 years later, Minju Kim, the little girl who had been evacuated from Busan on the first day of the invasion, stood before the Galactic Council as Earth's youngest ambassador. She was 23 years old and spoke 17 alien languages fluently. The Velthrak came here with 9,900 ships, she told the assembled representatives of hundreds of worlds. They expected to conquer us in a few days. Instead, they learned that humans don't just fight with our hands or our weapons. We fight with our imagination, our creativity, and our absolute refusal to give up. She gestured to a display showing the 18 ships that had ended the war. These vessels represent more than military victory. They represent the moment when Earth stopped being prey and became protector. We fought not just for our own survival, but for the right of all species to remain free. In his office on the rebuilt Earth Defense Headquarters, Admiral Hyunwoo Park kept a simple memorial. 18 model ships representing the crews who had flown the final mission. Below them, an inscription in Korean and Galactic Standard read, "They came to conquer Earth. They learned that Earth conquers fear." The invasion that began with 9,900 ships had ended with humanity's emergence as the galaxy's newest and most respected military power, not because humans were stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because when everything seemed hopeless, they had chosen to hope anyway. And hope, the galaxy was learning, was the most powerful weapon of all.